Yo, what's going on everybody? Welcome back to yet another tier list video. In today's tier list, we are going to be ranking all of the Chapter 2 POIs. With Chapter 3 being just right around the corner, I thought it would be a fun idea to go and rank all of the POIs from the past 2 years. The first POI that we have here is going to be Pleasant Park from Season 3, when a lot of it was floating on top of the water. I'm going to be honest, Season 3 was probably my favorite season of the chapter. All the POIs being extremely different and having essentially all of them being on top of floaties or buoys, I guess you would call it. It was actually really fun and I enjoyed it. So for Pleasant Park, I am going to rate this as an A. When I get to the other POIs from that season, most likely they are going to be in the A list unless there's something completely just different that I didn't like about them. But going on into the next one, we have the rig. The rig was introduced in Season 2. Was not a fan of this POI at all. I know some people like it, but if you fell off of this POI, it was really kind of difficult, being that one, you landed in water, and two, it was high up to get back up into the POI. So for that, I'm just gonna honestly have to rate it a C. Going on into Craggy Cliffs, this is not a bad POI at all, especially that you have some fishing areas on top, but overall the POI is pretty well spread out. You typically have access to all the materials that you need as well. Also, if you did land in the fish stick restaurant, there were some slurp barrels on top, so that was some free shield for that. So I'm gonna have to give Craggy Cliffs a B. For Colossal Crops and Bony Burbs, I'm gonna rate these two the same. Both of these POIs were super bad. It was very difficult to build in POIs like this, and just overall these POIs were not fun to land at. So easily for me, those are gonna have to be some of, if not the worst POIs in the game. For Risky Reels, this has actually been a fan favorite POI ever since it was introduced back in Chapter 1. I don't think this POI was introduced on this map until I want to say Season 2, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that, but for this one, unless you're landing as a solo, this isn't really too great of a POI, being that there's not much loot really spread out. But just as a POI in general, it's not entirely too bad, but I am gonna have to give Risky Reels a C. Going on into Fortilla, like I said for the other stuff from Season 3, or even as it progressed throughout the season when the water level started to go down, I did really like this POI a lot. The POI had a vault. You also had ocean there with the mythic burst and the mythic chug jug, if I'm not mistaken. So overall, a really good POI in my opinion. Going on into Lazy Lake. Lazy Lake has been here since the beginning of Chapter 2 as well. A lot of these POIs have been around since the beginning of Chapter 2 with the very crappy map changes that we have had. It's really not a bad POI. A lot of stuff that you can land at, really spaced out. I'm probably gonna have to give this an A, just because of how spread out a lot of the stuff is, and there's a lot of buildings, so a lot of chance for loot. Just an overall pretty decent POI. Now for the middle of the map for Season 7, easily gonna be a D. There's like barely any loot there. There's literally no point to land there. I know there's a couple campfires around there if you just needed to rotate through it, but other than that, this location had literally no point and no benefit to going there. For the Agency, a really fun POI. A lot of craziness going on there because a lot of people try to land there, but no, overall it was pretty fun, especially trying to get the mythic from Meadows. So Agency was a pretty decent POI. Up next with the Grotto, easily gonna have to be an S tier. One of my favorite aspects about this POI, that a lot of it was mainly underground. You also had a vault, you had the mythic minigun. Going on into another Season 3 underwater POI, we have Sweaty Sands. Like I said, for all the POIs that were underwater, I really did enjoy them, so for me that's gonna have to be an A. Going on into Dirty Docks. Dirty Docks has actually been a pretty decent POI throughout the entirety of Fortnite Chapter 2. This POI literally has everything that you need, from wood, brick, metal, and it's really spaced out. Especially this season, Dirty Docks is a really good place to land at, so easily gonna have to be an A for me. Going on into Misty Meadows. Misty Meadows actually isn't too bad of a POI. I'm probably gonna have to rate it an A. You have a lot of options for fishing, you have a lot of options for rotating, of course with the water as well, and you have two completely different sections that if this one's crowded, you land over here. If this side's crowded, you land over here. Misty Meadows, not a bad POI. A lot of options with that one, so an A is where I'm gonna have to put it. Going on into the Yacht, I'm gonna rate the Yacht a B. Like I said for Risky, this is probably gonna have to be something that you're gonna land if maybe a max as a duo. You do have a vault that's there as well, so a lot to add on with there. And if you needed rotations, even though this isn't the way corner top of the map, you can swim right over into Steamy and then you have easy rotations from there. Up next, we have the Convergence, aka Q-Town, as a lot of people like to call it. This POI is very unique in the sense that it changes essentially almost every week or every 2 weeks. The only downside to this POI is It absolutely has no mats other than what you get off of floor loot or what you get from chest. You can't get any mats from this POI, so this really isn't someplace that you would want to like pick as like your top priorities to land at. So I'm gonna have to rate the Convergence as a C. Going on into the cabin at the middle of the map, I really actually do like this POI. You have a lot of options for rotations with the water. This would have to be something that you would probably have to land as a solo, being that there's not a lot of things that you can get from this. Of course, a lot of options for fishing, rotations like I just said. For corny crops, I'm probably gonna have to rate corny crops as a B. It's a lesser version. Actually, yeah, I'm gonna rate it a B. It did get a little worse after the season 7 live event, being that there are a few chunks of it taken out. Other than that, it's a numbed down version of Frenzy, of course being a far better POI than Corny. For Catty Corner is actually not a bad POI. You actually have a lot of options to get out of this place. This place also did have a vault back in, I want to say, season 3 when it was introduced with Kit. There's also a lot of ways to escape this POI if you needed to, with the porta potties in the trash can taking you elsewhere outside of the POI. For Steamy Stacks has always been, I'm gonna say, an S tier location. You had easy rotates with the 2 stacks right here, very spread out. You typically could get all the mats that you needed, except for maybe wood, but there's a lot of trees outside of it, so you didn't have to worry about it too much. You also have options to fish if you needed to, if you had circle, but like I said, if you needed to go, if storm was just not anywhere near you, you just hop in the stacks and you fly away and you're good. So I think Steamy Stacks definitely deserves to be an S tier. For the agency, that was for Fortnitemares in 2020. Not really big fan of this. It's essentially a downgraded version of the agency. A lot of it was just torn apart and overall just wasn't really that great of a POI. For Slurpy Swamps to me definitely has to be in the S tier. This POI essentially gave you full free shields, and it also had a slurp chuck that was just outside of the POI as well, so tons of options for health. Was a pretty spaced out POI, a lot of options to land at. You also had fishing around here as well. For Weeping Woods, I'm gonna have to rate a B. It wasn't entirely bad. You don't have a lot of options for getting metal or brick, but easily wood you're gonna get max from here. You also had some fishing with this river, but being that it only had 2 buildings, it didn't really give you too many options as far as landing, and so there's some benefits to it, but just overall it wasn't too great of a POI. So I think B is going to have to be a good spot to put it. Going on into Hunter's Haven, was not a bad POI at all. I'm going to give it a B. You had a lot of good positioning on the map, especially in season 5, just for that season alone, because that's when the POI just left after that season. You could just easily rotate over here and get into the sand area and just sand tunnel away. A lot of buildings for this as well, so like if you were going one building and obviously you were getting contested and you wanted to switch it up, you easily, I think there was like 6 to 7 different buildings, so you had a lot of options for spacing out and spreading out for landing and getting loot. For Salty Springs, this is a POI that has been around since the early stages of Fortnite. Of course, it went away during season 5. Well, actually it didn't completely go away, it just merged with Tilted Towers. It turned into Salty Towers, but for Salty Springs by itself, I'm gonna have to give it a B. Pleasant Park, I'm gonna have to rate an A. I know a lot of people don't like this POI with how spread out the houses are. I know that gives you a lot more options to land. If you were getting contested at a house and you really didn't have much space to move into another house without somebody already being there. Going on into the little shacks outside of Slurpy, I think there's a name for these. I don't know what it is off the top of my head. It's a pretty just POI. I know you have, of course, you have slurp barrels there as well, so free shield. And yes, you had fishing, but unless you're landing there maybe as a solo, I don't really see a point of landing there. Going on into the Spire, I'm gonna give the Spire a C. It is very unique in the looks of it, but just overall as a POI, yes, you had like the zip lines for rotation, but you're in the middle of the map, so you don't really have to worry about that too much. It's really not that great. I know a lot of people hated this POI, especially the mythic drum gun being there for like the beginning part of season 6. Going on into Frenzy Farm with the water, like I said, I love Frenzy Farm. Frenzy Farm is a great POI, and just having that uniqueness of pretty much a little bit of it being on the buoys and you know, underwater was pretty cool. I liked it a lot. For Colossal Coliseum, I'm gonna have to give it a C. It is a very unique looking POI, just like the Spire, but being that you really had very limited options on how you can get out of here, being that there was a lot of places in this POI that just couldn't be broke through, so a lot of your options were, unless you go through the main entrances on the top and the bottom, or you escaped out, there's really no other way to get out of this POI. For the Shark, easily the Shark's gonna have to be an A tier location. The only concern about this would have to be Circle. If Circle was pretty far away, that was going to have to be a legitimate concern. Really good POI, really cool looking as well. You also had the Vault. You had, I want to say for Sky, you had the Mythic Scar and the Mythic Grappler, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of advantages to landing the Shark, and I know this was a lot of people's favorite POI in season 2. For the Authority is easily going to be an A tier for me. If I'm rating the Agency as an A, the Authority definitely has to be an A. I really love the outer walls around it. It gave more options because I know you also not only had the water, but you also as well had the zip lines to get out if you needed as well. So just a lot of really cool, unique like aspects of this POI. For Believer Beach, I'm gonna rate this with Sweaty Sands. There's really hardly any difference for these POIs. I think the POIs are fairly nice, to be honest. I mean, there's a lot of options. Like if you want to land out here at Softies and you can like get fish if you want to, you also can just swim away. Really spaced out, a lot of options like where you want to land if like you're being contested for anything. So Believer Beach / Sweaty Sands, because there's hardly any difference. Maybe a gas station and some like sprays and like alien stuff from season 7. Other than that, there's hardly anything different with these POIs. For Holly Hedges to me is just a barely upgraded version of Salty Springs. That's the best comparison I can give it. Not too bad. I mean, you had houses to spread out. You can get a lot of mats if you needed to because there's a lot of fencing throughout the middle area and the gardens, so it wasn't entirely too bad. But yeah, like I said, it's just basically a barely upgraded version of Salty. For Camp God, I'm gonna have to give it a B. Really spaced out, especially if you have a trio. You just each land at one of these buildings. The only thing I would have to say for this, like a few other POIs like the Yacht maybe and some other places, is Storm, especially being that the river is flowing against you and you have to go through a lot of these mountain ranges. So if you're comfortable and you're well aware where Storm's going to be and rotations, I think Camp Cod's a pretty decent place to go. For Frenzy was one of my favorite locations in season 1 of chapter 2. It kind of sucks that they like switched it out basically when season 4 came around and Stark basically plopped right on top of it. It was a really fun place to land at. I enjoyed this POI a lot. For Stealthy Stronghold, I'm going to rank it as a B. The reason I want to rank this as a B is because yes, it is a very unique POI and it's kind of like a little biome change that I hope we please get in chapter 3. But going away from that, the POI itself, you have a lot of options for fishing. Easily can get max wood. You can kind of get a lot of brick from here with like the little ruins areas and such. For Retail Row, I'm gonna actually have to rate this an A. I think it's a far better version of Pleasant. It's a little bit more condensed, but you have a lot more options in my opinion to land at than Pleasant Park. This is probably one of the POIs I still land at, even though I'm really sick and tired of this map and all the like non-POI changes that we've had over the like 2 years, it feels like. For Corny Complex, I'm guessing, of course, I'm just going to throw it with the other Corny Complex. I didn't know there was 2 in this tier list, but this is a worse version of Corny Complex, but it's not entirely too different. For Stark was an S tier drop in my opinion. Really spaced out. The overall, just the huge like, you know, meatball that people called it that plopped on Frenzy. A lot of options to go, even if it wasn't just Stark. I know you had like this big pond area that was like above Stark, so even if you wanted to go to this big meatball area, you still had a lot of options, if not just only this. Going on into the Orchard is actually, I'm gonna have to say, A tier POI. It's one of the best non-name POIs that are inside of the game. You have a lot of options for spreading out with, of course, like the supermarket, you have the barn, the house, you have cabbages, you have apples, you have a lot of mats that you can get from this. For Sludgy Swamps, D. I think season 7 made both Coral and Sludgy just absolutely worse. Sludgy is not terrible to land at. It's not anything special anymore. You took half of the POI away, which took a lot of options as for like health out of way as well. I know there's still slurp barrels there, but just overall as a POI, when you take half of it away, it makes it just a terrible place to land. For like the worst version of Coral, if Coral's a D, then the lesser version, surprisingly, I didn't know how you can make a bad POI even worse, but yeah, it's gonna have to be easily a D for that. For Salty Towers, last but not least, I'm going to have to rate this as an A tier. It was a really cool mix of both Tilted and Salty. You also had the sand tunneling if you needed to get away. Overall, just a really decent and unique POI, being that it was merging 2 other POIs together. So I think Salty Towers definitely deserves to be as an A. And that is going to be it for today's video. Be sure to comment down below some changes that you would make to your tier list, and also comment down below what were some of your favorite POIs throughout chapter 2. Other than that, be sure to hit that like button down below. below, subscribe to the channel if you're new, and I'll see you guys next video.